Hello, Bilal. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us and being willing to share your point of view on this technical area.
Thank you, Juan, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be talking about it.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit more about yourself, your technical background, your interests.
So I have a background in transportation engineering, which is a very specialized field looking at transportation systems, their operations, their management, the demand that comes towards transportation systems. I also have a master's in computer science, and I've worked in software industry for a couple of years as well.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit more about your take on the current state of the art for smart cities. What do you think about it?
So I think I'll concentrate on the area that I am focusing on, which is the mobility. So I call it smart mobility. So within smart mobility, I think there's a lot of activity going on, and there are at least 3-4 different dimensions where there's a strong activity going on in terms of research as well as in terms of commercialization, especially connectivity. So we see that more and more transportation systems at vehicle level, at infrastructure level, they are becoming more and more connected, and with technologies like 5G coming in, the connectivity has become more ubiquitous, and with that, there are tons of opportunities coming in for researchers as well as for industry to make these systems more efficient, more user-centric, as well as bring in new services. Then electrification is another dimension that is, very, very strongly happening. And there are a lot of opportunities in terms of the decarbonization of the transportation systems through electrification. And a lot of focus has been now given on the whole, life cycle and well to wheel level emissions as well, because by electrification you are removing the tailpipe emissions, but that does not mean that upstream emissions are not considered. So there's much more holistic approach there coming in, which is pretty good in terms of true decarbonization of the system. Automation, of course, is a great dimension that is happening. There was a much more pace in the beginning, but now it has become more steady, and the pace has slowed down, but still it's very steady. And we have found very specific use cases where it makes much more sense to have full automation, for instance, on highways or places where interactions with other types of modes are less. So these are some of the dimensions. I would say there are new services coming in. Mobility as a service is something that is just the beginning, and there's a lot that can be achieved within it. Urban air mobility, I think, is another disruptive direction that is happening, and it may mature very quickly within a few years. And another very important dimension that just happened because of this COVID is this virtual or tele work, and with the progress happening in virtual worlds from Meta and all sorts of other companies. I think there's a big scope for more involved telework happening, which will have consequences on transportation systems. Mm-hmm. So this is my take.
Yes, true. Lots of exciting developments as usual. And an industry that is so well established for more than a century, but still progressing continuously. Excellent. And in terms of barriers, what do you see are the main issues to realize all of these potential?
So I think some of the barriers are very typical as usual. For instance, openness, interoperability. These are very key barriers. But as the industry matures, I think there kind of an equilibrium established, and you get to a state where there's at least some level of interoperability, but that needs to be established very quickly, and in a manner where there's hopefully perfect interoperability. That is the goal, and for researchers, I think the openness and the cooperation is something that needs to be there. Whether that open access, especially, if there is if there are data sets available, if there's access to the code base, and the complete research is accessible and reproducible. That is something that is a big barrier at the moment. Similarly, standardization in terms of various technologies, but also on the research side, and the validation and benchmarking side is something that needs to be done as well. There is a role of a regulator, because transportation system usually is a public good, and the regulator has a very strong role. Here, either regulator can be too quick to react, or too late to react. So an example could be how Uber, for instance, came in the city of Toronto, and it just took over, but then the reaction of the municipal authorities, that was too late, and their reaction was very strong when they came up with when they came to know what's happening, and eventually they came to an equilibrium where there was some data sharing going on with Uber and Lyft and so on, but this whole was a very reactionary approach. Having a kind of a cooperation between the regulatory bodies, industry, and researchers, so that the regulations are constantly evolving while the technology is evolving as well. So that is something that needs to be done very carefully.
True. I think that's increasingly often the case, that technology comes in very disruptive and very quickly, and governments and decision makers and in the city, even law, struggle to catch up. Usually, as you said, they are reactive and they are remedial, as opposed to creating a nice environment for that technology to flourish without negative consequences to the citizens and so on. Yes, very interesting. And if you say you will have to put your money into something that will make the biggest difference, what do you think should be the next objective, the next priority, for society, but also for us as academics, as innovators, researchers, to make a positive difference in what's coming?
Yeah. So I think automation, it has definitely a big role in terms of making our systems more efficient, as well as safer. But I think the bigger difference that can be brought in is through, for instance, electrification. Electrification of a more sustainable, large-scale electrification of our transportation systems, and that is something that will have a much bigger impact, because if you look at the emissions that are coming in from transportation sector, at least in North America, they are top 1 or top 2. So they are definitely one of the major source. And I think I heard a couple of days ago that this is the only sector from which the emissions are still increasing. So I think as a society level impact, definitely the electrification, it would definitely, or in more general terms, the switch to alternative fuels that are much more greener than the current gasoline-based fuels. So that would definitely have an impact. But there's a caveat there as well. The caveat is that, okay, you are removing the tailpipe emissions, but then are you, taking it somewhere else? Is it that, the electricity that has been generated, that is coal-based or that is gas-based, So we need to account for those aspects as well. Or the mining of lithium that is done, how is it done? How much it is environmentally, what is the impact on the environment? So these aspects, they need to be looked at as well, and they should be looked at from the technology perspective, in the sense that coming up with more greener way to extract, for instance, lithium from the mines, transporting them usually they are transported on the sea, so transporting them in a greener manner, at the same time looking at the processing of it in a greener manner as well. So these are all technological challenges, but at the same time, there are societal challenges around it as well. Mines are displacing people, using other resources. So making sure that there is some responsible way of managing those aspects as well. So I would call these very key areas. So I think that's where the difference can be.
Very interesting. And in terms of automation, Bilal, where do you see the main candidates for that to take on, to succeed in the near future? What do you think will be the first few applications where that will be taken more seriously, let's say?
Yeah. So I think the way this industry started was, the model was to automate, to completely automate in all situations, right? That was the model that we started, and with that, there were some roadblocks, and the industry learned from what is happening, and now at least we have figured out that places where there is a more steady flow with similar sort of modes happening. So, for instance, on the highways, on the freeways, where there are only vehicles. Theoretically, there are no vulnerable road users, for instance, cyclists or pedestrians. So the perception model has a more constrained sort of task that it has to deal with, and there it is pretty good, and similarly the control side, the maneuvers that it has to manage, they are also a smaller subset. So in those sort of cases, I would say that the automation has a much bigger scope, and if you look at companies like there's a company here in the US and Canada called Getic, I think. They have been running completely autonomous operations on highways and a bit to run these goods between warehouses. So I would say that that's the biggest use case, and within this there is a strong role for connectivity as well, because on the highways, if you want to make the flow more efficient, usually you would bring in platooning, and this platooning with automation is something that I see as a very straightforward use case going forward.
Excellent. Well, that concludes our interview today. Bilal, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to meet you. I wish you like that.
Thank you so much. Thanks.